I wonder if you've ever walked into a room and felt really unwelcome. A few years back, I went to a gig in Birmingham with a friend, and we arrived a little early and we decided to find the nearest pub for a quick drink before the doors opened. We walked into this pub and I have never sensed a more hostile environment in my life. It was full of men and women with enough brawn on them to do me serious damage with very little effort. Someone was belting out My Way very badly on the karaoke. And as we walked in, everyone stopped their conversations to stare at us as we made our way to the bar. I don't think I have ever drunk a pint more quickly. I've been to churches that feel a bit like this too, where I turn up in jeans and a t-shirt and everyone else is wearing shirts and ties, and they stare at me in such a way that makes me want to slink off in the first hymn. I guess you might have a similar experience turning up in a shirt and tie and finding everyone else in shorts and t-shirts. This week, we've been thinking about Jesus welcoming and finding a place, a role for those who've let him down. Him welcoming and finding a place, a role for those who've been let down by church. Him going out of his way to welcome, to find a place for those who are most in need, and how in the church there should be a welcome, a place, a home for all those people too. Today I want to touch on a story from the Old Testament that demonstrates the way in which God uses the unwanted, has a welcome and a place for those who cannot find it anywhere else. Let me set the scene. In the time of Elisha, God's people are besieged in the city of Samaria. There's famine in the city because the food can't get in, and God lifts the siege. The enemy hear the sound of a great army in the night and they flee, but no one knows. And into this scene enter 4 men with leprosy. The men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp, entered one of the tents and ate and drank. They took silver, gold and clothes and went off and hid them. They returned and entered another tent and took some things from it and hid them also. Then they said to each other, "What we are doing is not right. This is a day of good news and we're keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let's go at once and report this to the royal palace." And so that's what they did. Now, lepers, name in those days for people with all sorts of skin conditions, which were often contagious. They weren't allowed to live in the city with others. They were banished. They were unwelcome. They were sent to live apart. They were unclean in the eyes of the law and unable to worship in the temple. And yet God chooses these 4 men. God uses these 4 men to share the good news, to do his will, to let his people know that they are now free. It reminds me of Jesus' resurrection. In those days, women weren't allowed to testify in court legally. They were unreliable witnesses. They were second-class citizens. And yet it was the women who first heard and saw the good news of the resurrection. It was they who were entrusted with that to go and tell others. Our God welcomes those that others disdain. Our God uses those that others have no use for. Our God values those that others say have no value. And I hope that we, his people, can do the same. That we can welcome, that we can value, that we can make room for those that others would turn away. That we can work alongside those that others would disdain. That we can listen and hear the good news from those that others would choose to ignore.